2, 1. Welcome to Football and AI. My name is Adeyemi Adesanya. And if you've ever wondered how it is that man can go up against the machine, this is the show for you. Here we try to pit man against machine with respect to football prediction. Many men have tried to reach the exact prediction of many football matches for many years. Some have been successful, many have failed. But artificial intelligence has come to bear and is coming to stay with a lot of things that we are doing in the world today. So today, as always, I'm joined by Dr. Oluseyi Akindele, the man behind the AI on this show. Shay, welcome to Football and AI.
Thank you very much. Good to be back. Good to be back. Thank you for having me once again. Yeah,
it was not a good outing. It was not a good outing last week for the AI.
Oh yeah, well, to be honest with you, it's slightly to be expected. You probably will be, iffy for the first 3-4 weeks, and then the AI will take over. I can assure you that. So let's can't wait to take on the challenger for this week.
All right. So this week we have Emeka Ime Madukairo. Emeka, welcome to Football and AI. You won my quiz yesterday, followed all the rules, put the hashtag, ensured you followed both of us, and you're the first guy to have everything well spelled out. Welcome to the show.
Yes. Thank you so much to have you. I'm so happy to be on the show. Looking forward to beating the AI.
Well, I wish you the very best of luck because humans are leading 1-0. Shay, let's go very quickly. Let's do a quick review of last week. You got a bit of flack from the Arsenal community because you predicted that Fulham was going to get the better of Arsenal. And they did come for you by letting you know that the AI is probably not, has not had his meds for the day. Quick comment on last week's results.
Well, to be to be honest with you, last week was a bit of like a free hit to be, because that's the first time the 3 newly promoted clubs were being played. And then, if you remember the last time Fulham were in the Premier League, I think AI uses data, and the data I used for last week for the last 4 seasons. So it will just aggregate and give you some mathematical model. And that was what he came up with. But as time, as we go more into the season and we start to add the new season's data, that's current form, I'm sure the AI would pick up. So that was why we had that for last week. And I'm sure for the next maybe 1 or 2 weeks, it may still continue in that line because we're still training the AI on the current data. So that was actually quite expected. And I'm not surprised that it turned out that the human was able to defeat the AI last week.
All right, so our friend Dami defeated the AI 4 predictions to 2. Interestingly, none of them got any correct score. Right, it was more correct outcomes. And Dami won himself cool 10,000 naira to enjoy his week or his weekend, as the case may be. So this week, let's go into it very, very quickly and look at, certain things as it relates to the AI. So I was doing some research here, and I stumbled on what is called intelligent agents. Can you shed a little bit of light on, what are intelligent agents as it has to do with artificial intelligence?
Well, anything AI, whatever it is, whether it is for predicting football scores or predicting, chain maintenance or predicting sales figures, it is all about data, and it is actually about the quality of the data. Now, this is actually the first time I'm also trying to apply it to AI, to football, sorry. Now, remember that there are 2 types of data that you have. There is data that is correlated. Then there is data that is not correlated. Now, what you're talking about intelligent agents are like data that is correlated. So, for instance, if I want to use, say, AI to predict whether you have COVID or not. So, what are the statistics I'll look at? I'll look at your blood sugar level. I'll look at your heartbeat. I'll look at your temperature. So by the time you put all that in and I model it, because the data is correlated, so the higher your temperature, the higher your body mass index, the higher your pulse reading, it gives me, because those data are directly correlated with whether you have COVID or not, I can model that. Now, football is played by human beings. So no matter what you do, if, for instance, last week, Liverpool beat Leeds last week, it doesn't mean that, or let me look at a Fulham lost to Arsenal last week. Now, AI is going to get that data and model it, and then we'll probably tell you that, oh, because Arsenal is higher than Fulham, and Fulham lost to Arsenal, and then they are playing maybe a better team this week, it means that Fulham would probably lose. That's what but unfortunately, we know in football, the data is not correlated. The fact that you beat, just like last season, who knew that Norwich was going to beat Newcastle, or who knew that Watford was going to beat Liverpool? So AI just works on the data, on the premise of correlated data. So that's why it's a bit of an, it's a bit of, there's a bit of difficulty in that. That's why nobody in the world has ever gotten, football predictions right, just because the data don't ever correlate. So it's easier to predict things like census figures, or to predict things like GDP numbers, or to predict things like it's even it's difficult even to predict the winner of the EPL this season. Even putting in anything can happen. Players can get injured. You could have red cards. You could have all sorts of things could happen just because it is a human being. So that's where the intelligent agents come in, depending on the data. But in football, there isn't all the variables that we use. Yes, they are all intelligent, but most of them are not really correlated. In a match, you can have one team have 10 shots on target and score 0 goals, and another team will have just 1 shot on target and score 1 goal, and that will be the end of the. But AI will look at it and say, oh, a team that is having 10 shots on target versus a team that is having 1 shot on target. Obviously, we're going to favor the team that is having 10 shots on target. So he's going to take it as a win, for that team. But we know in football, you can have 10 shots on target and not score 1 goal, and another team will have 1 shot on target, and that will be the end of it.
Okay. In trying to break it down, I also found that what kind of you are the expert. For those who want to go into artificial intelligence, what kind of programming language is used in artificial intelligence?
To be honest, it's really not a programming language. It's more sort of statistical modeling. So you can use like a program like something called R. It's just called R Studio. So what that allows you to, in fact, you can actually do a bit of stuff in Excel, a bit of, data cleaning and all that. You can start with Excel, and then, but if you want to do predictive analytics, you need to know a lot about, neural networks. You need to know a bit things about deep learning. You need to know things about statistical modeling. You need to know things about, learning rates because you have to train the data. You need to know things that relate to that, So it's not a specific programming language. Certain languages that you need to understand. Certain, like maths, like your algebra, calculus, and all that. So those are the kind of things that you need to actually first understand. So you can actually model in Excel if you understand those languages.
Now, seeing stuff like Java, Julia, Haskell, Lisp as some of the programming languages for artificial intelligence.
Well, to be honest, Python is actually the best if you want to go that route. Python has a lot of libraries, a lot of mathematical libraries that you can actually use. You can also use Java and all those ones. But primarily, I would advise anyone who wants to go into, artificial AI, machine learning. AI is just the, body of knowledge. Machine learning is the topic. That's the subject matter.
It's interesting you brought that up. My next question was going to be, what is the difference between AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning?
Yeah, well, it's artificial intelligence is the whole. It's a bit like saying, it's about the same difference as when you talk about someone is a musician, someone is a singer, and someone is an artist. There really isn't anything like music that it's about song. So AI is the body of language, is the body of knowledge. Artificial, it's like the industry. Like you say banking. Nobody's ever a banker. You can't say, you just say I'm a banker, but you know that in the bank you are either in operations or this or that. But when you are just going to categorize everybody that works in a bank, you just say they are all what? Bankers. But really, you can't say I'm a banker. You have to be specific. So AI is like saying I'm a banker. Then machine learning is now that field that says, that talks about learning, data using, machine learning is about predictions. So when you even have things like self-driving cars, they are predicting what will happen. So you train them on old data, on data that is known generally. So I can now train something on recognizing, say, your face. So every time it sees your face, it knows that, oh, this is Yemi's face, just because it has prior knowledge of that. So it's able to infer from that knowledge to predict what is now currently seeing in front. So that's what machine learning is all about, especially as it relates to data. So we now use a bit of mathematics in between to find correlations between, for instance, in the modeling, maybe you get to the question like, okay, what's the relationship between shots on target and goals scored? What's the relationship between red cards and goals scored? What's the relationship between playing at home and playing away? What's the relationship between scoring first and so you have to, those are the kind of correlations you find in those data that are not too clear. So that's essentially the difference between AI and machine learning.
It's interesting that you mentioned going into the nitty gritty. I do know that there is a stat that says that Manchester United have not lost at Old Trafford in any game that they've gone ahead. Does AI take that sort of stat into consideration in predicting scorelines?
Yes, it takes a lot of those things into consideration. A lot of those things. In fact, before you even start to predict, it models old data. So that's what we call input correlation. So you find out that any team that, once you are playing, just as you said, if you're in Man U, you're playing at home and you score first, there's always that 60-70% chance that you go on to win the game. There's more than a 60% chance that a team leading at halftime would most likely win the game or draw the game. Sometimes they lose, but statistically speaking, in fact, in my usage of data, I found out that most teams hardly ever score more than, most away teams in the Premier League in the last 10 seasons, they hardly ever score more than a goal before halftime. So at most they score one goal. So if you look at that, those are the kind of things that, statistically speaking, 80% of the time, if an away goal is going to be scored, it will be just one. So you have some situations like, and which is why when you're doing AI as well, you have to take out data that is outlier. For instance, last season, Leicester went to Southampton to beat Southampton 9-0. Yeah. Now, if you put that in your statistics and you want to model Southampton against Leicester this season, it will probably tell you that, because they won 9-0 last season, they are probably going to win like 6-0 this season. But we know that was just a one-off.
That's a one-off.
And another thing that happened in that game was that there were 2 red cards. How many times in a football match do you get a team having 2 red cards? So you have to model. So unfortunately, that's why AI is garbage in, garbage out. So you have to now take into consideration what is the likelihood that when they play again this season, there will be 2 red cards. Obviously, and in the games over time, you find out that highly unlikely. So that's why the human bit comes in. So you have to, the human now, you now model that it is highly unlikely that there will be 2 red cards. So it's highly unlikely that Leicester will beat Southampton again 9-0 this season. But if you just use the data purely like that, and you may end up with Leicester winning again by like 6 or 7-0, which we know is impossible.
It's interesting you went to the Leicester game, because last week in France, Marseille went to PSG, hadn't beaten PSG in the La Classique in 9 years, hadn't won at PSG in 10 years. And They won, and both teams in total had 5 players sent off. So that means by the next time they're playing again, some of that will play a part in the overall decision making of the AI. I believe I'm correct.
Yes, you are correct. So what AI tends to do is, okay, for instance, there are 2 models that AI builds in. So one of the first models is, okay, if this weekend now Liverpool is playing Chelsea is playing Liverpool, Chelsea at home. So it's going to first model, okay, in the last 5 seasons, Chelsea versus Liverpool at Stamford Bridge. What are the average scores? So it will model that, right?
Mhm.
Now, it will now model again, okay, Liverpool in the last 5 games of the season, like, the last 5 games, what has been their average score? It will look at that for Chelsea as well. Then you now put all that, the Liverpool Chelsea game in the last 5 seasons, the Liverpool games, the last 5 or 6 games of Liverpool, then the last 5 games of Chelsea, then to model that and put it in a mathematical model. So that's the way it works and makes those predictions.
So, for instance, last week when we had Tottenham, Everton, Jose Mourinho hadn't lost in 10 opening,
The fixtures.
opening games of the season. He's won 9 and only drawn 1. Interestingly, Everton went to Spurs last week and won.
Just let me check
So
this in a bit.
it's a lot of things, and I don't know that over time the AI will get in tune with some of this data in making its
predictions. Yes.
Let me come to Emeka now. Emeka, for you, when you are making your predictions, what are the considerations you make?
Like Dami said last time, a bit of everything. I look at history, the stats, and then I also look at my instincts, what my gut feeling tells me, and obviously a bit of bias.
Which one has worked for you
I have to
the most? Your gut feeling, bias, instinct, or stats?
Gut feeling and stats. Yes.
Pick one.
Gut feeling most times.
Your gut feeling. Okay, so last week, if we had asked you Tottenham versus Everton, who did you go for last week?
I expected Everton to get at least a draw. I knew they would not lose. I was hoping for a draw. It was one of their worst records is against Tottenham away.
Yes.
But because of the players they had brought in and the Carlo Ancelotti factor, I just expected they will get at least a draw. I didn't expect them to win, but I thought they would get a draw.
Interestingly, there was no draw this last weekend in the Premier League. Decent number of goals. Whilst Derby went for Liverpool 2-1, that eventually put up a result that was completely came out of the blue. 4-3 eventually was the result, and I don't know, Emeka, were you surprised by the final result at Anfield when Leeds visited Liverpool?
The scoreline, yes. I was actually expecting a 3-1, but I didn't expect to see 7 goals. No, but I knew Leeds would score, but I expected them to lose. But I knew they would score.
Okay, interesting. You expected them to score, but you didn't expect that they would take Liverpool that close. Okay, so Sheyi, let's go into what were the changes you made this week with respect to the AI.
Okay, thank you very much. There were about 2 changes I made. Now, I discarded old data. What I mean by old data is for last week, because I didn't have Fulham, West Brom, and Leeds did not play in the Premier League. Yeah. I had to go back as far back as when Fulham and West Brom were in the Premier League. So that was the data I used to predict. So this week, because they've now played, at least there's something that has coming. So I discarded old data, so I only used data from last season. Okay, all the scores from last season and last week's results, the weekend's results. Okay, now then secondly, another thing I did was I introduced two variables, two columns to weigh the team. Somehow you have to be able to you have to be able to assign weight to the teams. So I used the points tally for last season as the weight. So right now Liverpool finished with like 99 points, so they are graded 99. Man City finished 81 points, so they are 81 points. So it's like, when you play FIFA, it gives you ratings of teams. So so what I did with the newer teams was I just placed them on the average score for the last 3 teams of last season. Those were the teams that were relegated. Bournemouth. I added three points together and I divided by 3. So the 3 points gave me 89 divided by 3. That's like 90 divided by 3, 30 points. So I just put the 3. So I introduced that column so that when they are playing, so for instance, Liverpool playing, Chelsea playing Liverpool today, Chelsea would have a point of, they finished with 56 points last season. Now they will be on 59 points. Liverpool will be on 102. So I introduced that as a metric to kind of, weigh the strengths of those teams so that at least when it goes in, it will be able to model properly, just to give them a certain, So those were the 2 changes, that. And then another change I made was, instead of building 3 models, last week I built 3 models. One to predict halftime scores, one to predict the full-time result, and one to predict the full-time scores. I did away with the one that will predict, halftime score, and then model just to predict the full-time results in terms of the outcome, and then the one that will predict the full-time scores. So I narrowed it down, took out the old data, and just used new data, even though it was fewer. So that was what I did for this week.
This week we have 10 matches as a whole, unlike 8 last time, because United and City were still on their break. Now, how did you handle Leeds versus Fulham?
What I did with Leeds versus Fulham was I just looked at their last week's results alone, together with all the statistics that came with it, their shots on target, their possession, their, So that was what I modeled for that.
Is it not safe to say you are narrowing things down too much?
Well, because if I have to go back to the last time Leeds and Fulham, I will be using very old data that is not relevant. Which is why I said I am using correlate. Football statistics is not correlated data. It is not. It is what we call negatively correlated. So I can't use, for instance, if I go back as far as 16 years ago when Leeds were in the Premier League and when they met Fulham back then, it wouldn't. I can't use that today because, first of all, the players have changed, the managers have changed, everything about the club has changed. So I can't really use that to model now. So the closest thing I can use to model was what happened last week, which was what AI now used.
Yeah, but so how do we handle for Leeds Fulham, for instance? They played each other last season.
Yes.
In the championship.
But in the championship is not the Premier League.
Okay,
championship is the Premier League.
So that's where you make the distinction as well.
Yes, I know. Championship does not come into play when you're, it's like saying you're modeling friendly matches when you want to predict World Cup scores. No, championship is far different. The mentality, the things at stake at that time, the refereeing, the whole vibe for championship is not. So you can't really you can't really model that and say, and then the players have changed, the level of things have really changed. So it wouldn't make sense to now predict, using championship, numbers.
Okay. All right. Let's get into it very quickly. Emeka. Is Emeka there? Okay. I muted you previously. Emeka. All right. Let's get into it.
Yeah, I'm here.
Time to deliver your predictions. She is also ready. So let's go into it very quickly. The first game for this week, Everton versus West Brom.
Yeah. 2-0 Everton.
2-0 Everton. Shay, what do you have?
Well, AI has 3-1 for Everton.
3-1 Everton. 3-1 Everton. Okay. Next game, Leeds Fulham. Baker.
3-1 Leeds. 3-1 Leeds.
3-1 Leeds. Okay. Okay. Leeds Fulham.
4-1 Leeds.
4-1 Leeds. Okay. Manchester United Crystal Palace.
2-1. 2-0. 2-0
2-0 who?
United. Sure, obviously.
2-0
I'm a Man United fan.
Okay. You have brought emotion into this one. Shay, Manchester United Crystal Palace.
2-0 Man U.
2-0 as well.
Yes.
Okay. Arsenal West Ham.
3-1 Arsenal.
3-1 Arsenal. Arsenal West Ham, Shay.
Well, it's gone for 1-1.
You, I
Again.
don't know what group I've done to you. But, Southampton, Tottenham. Both of them lost on the
2-2.
opening day. 2-2.
Yeah.
Hey, what about you?
AI has Southampton 2, Tottenham 1.
2-1. Back-to-back defeats for Jose Mourinho according to the AI. Newcastle United, Brighton. Emeka.
1-1.
1-1. 1-1. Hey, Newcastle United, Brighton.
0-1.
Oh, Brighton will go to St. James's Park and get a result. A certain friend of ours, SOE, will not be happy with this. Chelsea hosting Liverpool, the big game of the weekend. Emeka?
Yes. 1-2 Liverpool. 1-2. Liverpool to win.
Liverpool. Okay.
1-2 as well.
1-2 as well. People should not be agreeing too much. Leicester City, Burnley. Leicester City, Burnley.
Leicester, Burnley, 2-0 Leicester.
2-0 Leicester. Back-to-back wins for Leicester as far as Emeka is concerned. Cheyi?
Same thing, 2-0 Leicester.
Are you people in the same place? Aston Villa, Sheffield United.
1-2 Sheffield.
Sheffield United to go to Villa and win. Last time they were there, the first game after the pandemic, it ended 0-0, and that result was probably the result that ensured Villa stayed up in the Premier League. Remember the goal line technology malfunction?
Controversial, yes.
Yeah.
Shea Villa, Sheffield United.
0-1.
0-1. Well, if Bodo Guti is watching, he's not going to be happy with this show that I'm predicting against his Aston Villa. Final game of the weekend, which is on Monday night, Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Manchester City. Always an explosive tie between both teams. What say you, Emeka?
I expect 1-3 City. They've not won there for 2 seasons, I think so. Yes.
So you expect
1-3.
1-3 City. Yes. You expect City to win there this season. Wolves are always a very difficult team to play, but they had a hiccup in midweek in the Carabao Cup. Shay, over to you. Wolves, Man City.
1-2.
1-2. 1-2. Okay, so Pep Guardiola to get off to a great start at the at Wolverhampton Wanderers. So wow. So I'm looking at the results, and
we only define about 3 or 4 games, I think.
Aside from Arsenal, Southampton Spurs, Newcastle Brighton,
every other result.
Every other thing you kind of agree.
So it's about winning the score line now, which is what I wanted you to do at the beginning. Not just getting the result, getting the score line.
It's about who gets the score line to differentiate
Yes.
both of you. Interesting. Thank you very much. It's been let me we have some comments. Let me take one of the comments. Dami, our winner from last week, has he's joining us. He says this AI don't like us at all.
It's working with data. So Arsenal were pretty poor last season. So
He said, Skinny Peel says, please, Jamie, post the predictions online so we can add it to our ACA during the weekend. You will pay for this special service. So. And please, punters' discretion is advised. Don't come and say it's boy and I gave you a result that did not work. Please, let me put that disclaimer there. Opat 79 says Arsenal will definitely win 3-0. Well, we have to wait and see. Well, it's been another fantastic show on football and AI. Shay, thank you as always. Emeka, thank you for joining us. I hope your predictions come, to light and you get yourself 10,000 naira to, enjoy yourself. Thank you, everybody that's joined in. Thank you for those that sent in comments. Join me at 5 p.m. as we preview the new Serie A season on No Touch Screens. Thank you very much. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Best
Doc.
of luck, Emeka. Yeah, cheers.
Thank you so much. Thank you.